In the last hour, members of Parliament from across all parties demonstrated their support for the Prime Minister in the trade feud with U.S. President Donald Trump after a weekend in which Trump pounded his Twitter keys with words denouncing Trudeau. Today's question period offered up national support for the Prime Minister.
We will stand with Canadian workers and the families impacted by this escalating trade war. Can the Prime Minister tell Canadians what his plan is to resolve this impasse that we have with our closest ally and trading partner?
Yeah.
What the weekend told us, Mr. Speaker, is that the idea that there's a national security context to supporting Canadian workers, Mr. Speaker, the idea that there's a national security concern that the United States might have with respect to aluminum and steel industries in Canada and the hardworking women and men who earn their living from those sectors is in fact incorrect, and we will always stand with Canadian workers and thank our colleagues opposite for their support.
And we now have new tape just in from the House of Commons. Moments ago, the House adopted an NDP motion against Donald Trump. Have a listen.
Mr. Speaker, at this difficult moment in our history with our U.S. neighbours, Canadians need to know that all sides of this House stand united as one. Mr. Speaker, there have been talks amongst the parties, and I believe if you seek it, you will find consent for the following motion: that the House recognize the importance of Canada's long-standing, mutually beneficial trading relationship with the United States of America. Stand with Canadian workers and communities that directly or indirectly depend on this trading relationship. Strongly oppose the illegitimate tariffs imposed by the U.S. government against Canadian steel and aluminum workers. Stand in solidarity with the Government of Canada in its decision to impose retaliatory tariffs. Remain united in support of Canadian farmers and supply management, which is integral for dairy, chicken, turkey, and egg farming. Reject disparaging ad hominem statements by U.S. officials which do a disservice to bilateral relations and work against efforts to resolve this trade dispute.
Does the honourable member have the unanimous consent of the House to propose the motion? Yes. Agreed. The House has heard the terms of the motion. Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the motion? Yes. Carried.
Now let's talk more about that NDP motion that just passed unanimously in Ottawa. It's about the escalating feud with Donald Trump, and the CBC's Evan Dyer joins me now with, wow, you know, I mean, that's quite something. That's, again, we've had a few telling moments today in terms of this Team Canada, if you will, against this Trump administration.
Well, let's just take the last time that the House of Commons unilaterally passed a motion with the word condemn or reject in it. I looked back, and it was in March. It was in condemnation of the nerve gas attack in Salisbury, England, which the British pinned on Vladimir Putin. So this is not something that happens very often, and it's not something that happens over anything minor. We don't see the three parties come together very often on any issue, but much less to condemn, essentially reject words spoken by the President of the United States. Let's just look at a few key parts of that motion that passed. There were 6 clauses. We'll look at 3 of them. One of them, strongly oppose the illegitimate tariff. Stand in solidarity with the decision to impose retaliatory tariffs. And lastly, reject disparaging ad hominem statements by U.S. officials which do a disservice to bilateral relations. You know, that reminded me that Stockwell Day was telling an interesting story there from history about the insults by Richard Nixon to Pierre Trudeau. And let me just finish that story by saying Pierre Trudeau's reaction at the time was to say, "I've been called worse things by better people." And it appears that the Government of Canada is going to take a similar approach, brushing off the insults, certainly not responding with any personal insults to Donald Trump. But one thing that we have to say after witnessing what happened today in the House of Commons, Donald Trump has not strengthened his negotiating position. You don't strengthen your negotiating position by uniting the other side against you. And we should mention another clause that was in that motion that just passed, which very specifically called on all parties to unite in support of supply management in Canada. And they broke it down. They mentioned the sector specifically: dairy, eggs, chicken, turkey. This is going to be a very hard thing to back off now. You know, the three parties have all said we're going to stand by all of these sectors. How could that now be lightly negotiated away? You know, the truth is that These tariffs are matched on the U.S. side by tariffs on products like shelled peanuts, 160%, tobacco, 350%. These tariffs apply, despite NAFTA, to Canadian producers, and we grow tobacco in this country. So there's no sign that Canada's backing down on supply management, now less than ever.
But do you think, Evan, that, I mean, this looks very much like a trade war between Canada and the United States?
Absolutely. Of course, it is that. It has become that already. I mean, once a major sector of your economy, like steel and aluminum, is targeted with 25 and 10% tariffs, and you retaliate with, tariffs on a huge range of products, consumer products, metals, you name it. We are effectively in a trade war. And of course, Donald Trump is explicitly threatening now to escalate it to the nth degree by including automobile tariffs. How would Canada even respond to automobile tariffs? It's hard to say. It's difficult to imagine us taking the same action against the United States because there's no rational or logical way to impose an automobile tariff between the U.S. and Canada, since every car is a mix of U.S. and Canadian parts. Are you going to take them apart down to the last screw and put tariffs on some of them and not on others? It's impossible to disentangle the North American car industry in that way and impose tariffs. But Canada, if it has to hit back on automobile tariffs of 25%, it's going to have to target a much larger range of products than the $16.6 billion worth we saw in response to the steel and aluminum tariffs. And it would affect an enormous range of U.S. products. It would have to match dollar for dollar. And everything that we're hearing indicates that the government of Canada intends to do exactly that if it has to.
All right, Evan, thank you. The CBC's Evan Dyer, live in Ottawa.